Okay, there's a little bit of a glow down going here. My nose is all kinds of blocked more than normal. Is it that obvious that I've only slept 4 hours after doing a 12-hour night shift? But it's okay. I get to record a video, which I love doing. It's episode 1 of the Any Good movie review. These are movies that I'm actually watching for the first time. A lot of you are going to be surprised by the movies I will eventually go on to review. Probably not this one. This one is like kind of recent, but there are so many movies that they're like pop culture icons, or they're just movies that people have seen in general anyway, and I've never watched them, and I will be watching and reviewing them for the first time. So it'll be a bit of like a reality check and a little bit of unique perspective in terms of a 25-year-old male who is watching films 25 years too late. I initially had this in mind to do 3 movies in one video, but I realized I would be rushing through too many plot points, and the things I learned from the films would be glossed over. And there are some things in films that I find like hidden meanings and whatnot that I would love to go through in these reviews. And a lot of these hidden meanings are what for me makes a film really good. So my reviews will be based on deeper meaning and what I believe to be good storytelling. This is by no means or in no way, shape or form for me to say that my verdict on these films make it a good film. The way I see it is that if I was intrigued to watch the film, regardless if it's good or bad, I basically say you should watch it, because either way it was an experience for me. We're going to get started with episode 1, and the movie that I have watched is called Awake. It's a 2021 film straight to Netflix, starring Gina Rodriguez, directed by Mark Raso. I don't know. The concept of the film is an apocalypse film, but with a little bit of a subversion, a little bit of a twist. Instead of it being a looming physical threat, so your zombies or your aliens or your monsters that come out from nowhere, who knows, an ambiguous event causes a change in makeup of the brain that stops human beings from being able to sleep. And the idea is how sleep deprivation drives people insane, which I can sort of relate to right now. Right off the bat, I thought it was a very, very interesting take on an apocalyptic future, because as opposed to a scary entity or like a thrilling entity that makes the genre rely a lot on jump scares and a constant sense of dread looking out for a physical enemy, you become your own worst enemy essentially, because regardless of how strong your foundation is, or regardless of how good your resolve is, after 4 or 5 days without sleep, your brain is going to start collapsing in on itself, and doesn't matter how strong you are, it will kill everyone. Enough about the boring science or whatever. We talk about the movie. For the review, I'm going to break it down into a couple of categories into what I think makes a good movie. There's a couple: a decent narrative, character development, and character build-up. Those two kind of go hand in hand, and a satisfying ending. Let's talk about the narrative first. So, impulse reaction for me is going to be that it doesn't really have it has a bit of a formulaic narrative, which if you've seen films like Bird Box or A Quiet Place, it's the idea that an ambiguous threat happens at the beginning of the film. The idea that it's not necessarily explained, but at the same time, it's not bad that it's not explained. The idea it's not about the origin of the threat. You just have to kind of accept that it's happened, and then you can get into the action of the film. We find that a lot of films try really hard to explain what's the origin of this threat that's appeared out of nowhere. People want to know where it's come from. But for me personally, I find it ruins the sense of mystery, and it makes whatever the threat is that much more terrifying if you actually have no idea where it's come from. The good example for me is films like Bird Box, where I don't believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong because it's been a while since I've seen it, but I don't believe we ever find out what the monster or the creature or whatever it actually was, the entity was that caused people to start killing themselves. Spoiler alert for Bird Box. I mean, is it a spoiler? Yeah. It's alluded to later on. The characters make assumptions. Oh, we think it was this, we think it was that, but it's never directly proven. So yeah, formulaic, but at the same time, it's not the worst formula to copy. Having said that, the second aspect of this formula is one that has been seen multiple times in movies. It's the idea of a parent, and for some reason usually a single parent, it always turns out to be a single parent with their kids, and they have to basically cross the country. I don't know if they cross the country exactly in this film, but it's a long distance trek, and of course they face threats while trying to get to the location, which is ultimately where the film's going to finish. It's a trope that's been seen before. For me, the most notable is the video game The Last of Us. Literally a cross-country story of a father figure on his own and a daughter figure crossing the country to go to a location. It's something that's been seen multiple times, so it doesn't really push boundaries in terms of that centerpiece that holds the narrative together. Oh, my nose is so blocked today. Another trait that it copies is the idea of and once again it's specifically a young girl who is the key. I'm gonna bring up the example of The Last of Us again. The idea that Ellie in The Last of Us is immune to the virus, so she's the key for a cure. The main character, played by Gina Rodriguez, she plays Jill Adams. Her daughter, Matilda, is the only person of importance to the story directly that can sleep. One thing that is very interesting that's done early on, but it's kind of abandoned as well early on, is the idea that in a society that's driven insane by the fact that it can't sleep, she could very well be perceived as a messianic character. There's even like hints of her being like compared to Jesus, where it was being said that the same way Jesus was sacrificed to save humanity, they should sacrifice her. It was a concept that I thought would have been very interesting if it was maybe a little bit more tied to the overall plot. The idea that maybe some kind of religious movement is formed in order to sacrifice or whatever, and that would be the threat, but it does evolve into a standard fighting the military storyline, which again, The Last of Us. That's all I have to really say about the plot. I'm trying to think if there's anything else a little bit more memorable. I think the only other thing of note to be said is that there is a subplot of Jill being an absent parent, I guess, not being the best parent to her children, so it's the idea that it's being tested as well during this apocalypse. If I'm being honest, the trope also sounds kind of familiar. I'm sure there's been films where the parent who hasn't been a good parent is forced to become a good parent in the face of these kind of odds. It's unfair for me to say, I guess, because I can't even really name an example, but maybe you guys could let me know if that kind of thing does happen in other films, but it just sounds too familiar to me. But I'm going to get onto like the part of the film that I personally liked. Like, I don't like to bash on these films, especially when they're Netflix originals, which for me are very, very hit and miss, and unfortunately they miss a lot more times than they hit. But the thing that I liked about this film was a little bit of character backstory and development of the protagonist, Jill Adams. And the reason why I like it is because it's a 1 hour 37-minute film. You'd imagine it's, so compared to your standard feature length these days, it's on the shorter side. I'm not gonna lie, like if it's below 100 minutes, it's actually on the shorter side, and they implied everything very well. It was very little exposition dump, if you ask me, in terms of what her character story is, but I got a very good idea into what it was, and the idea that I was able to piece together myself, for me, made it a better experience. And then you could connect dots later on in the film that would make you say, oh, so this is probably what happened, this is probably what happened, which I think is the way it should be done. But essentially, I'll explain the characters' key points all throughout the film. The film starts off with Jill Adams working as a security guard at a university, and she's also stealing pills from the campus. I don't know if it's from like an on-campus pharmacy or something, but she's stealing pills from there and selling them to a dealer as a way to make extra money. We then see that her kids live with, I believe, her mother-in-law. That's my guess. It's implied that she is a parent who never really properly took care of the children. That's why they are living with their grandmother. The grandmother also then at some point asks Jill for pills that she used to take, and she responds along the lines of she doesn't take pills anymore. It implies that she was a rehabilitating drug addict, which would explain why she's kind of separate from her children. And then the story advances. The sleep deprivation has been around for a couple of days now. We learn just before this, during the early days, that Jill actually worked as a member of the military for a psychiatrist who specifically studied sleep. Jill explains that as a method of torture, they would use sleep deprivation to get information out of terrorists, I believe. She specifically says that the things, not verbatim, but the idea being the things that they did for information, implying that sleep deprivation is like a very nasty method of torture, because you are putting a lot of stress on the brain as opposed to just hurting physically or your standard means of torture. So if you start connecting the dots, you could say that Jill's joined the military, maybe she wants to do good, protect her kids. She ends up working with this doctor who engineers methods of torture with sleep deprivation. If Jill was to witness this, it would have very much traumatized her, I'd imagine. She implies that you struggle to sleep because of the things that you see. So maybe she starts taking pills to help her get to sleep. Maybe she becomes addicted to pills. Maybe she becomes a junkie because of it, because of all the things that she's witnessed. And that's where the story then starts. We find out that she got addicted to pills. She had to go into rehab, and it brings a little bit of sympathy to the character as opposed to her just being an outright user. You understand why she used, and it's all done without them necessarily explaining it, which I thought was clever. As formulaic as some of the tropes of the film has been, I thought that was very, very well done. And it also lends a little bit of explanation as to why the character was very, very well equipped to handle this apocalyptic event, because she's seen what sleep deprivation does to people, so she knows how many days she has to get her family across the country before she herself goes insane and dies and leaves her kids to die. It's all explained in, like, it's all subtext, like you have to join the dots together yourself. And in a film that wasn't as exciting in terms of a plot, that lent a little bit more of a brain game to it, so it made the film somewhat more entertaining to watch when you realize that, oh, this is what's going on. I thought the protagonist was really well done. I think Gina Rodriguez, she's a very good actress, and she did the best with what she had. I thought Matilda, Ariana Greenblatt, who plays Matilda, I thought she was, if you had to pick the side of children in these like apocalypse movies, the ones that are all like scary movies or whatever, you have two sides, ones that are executed very well and the other where the kid just comes off annoying. She was more on the satisfying side in terms of a character. There is a weird line where she tries to find out if her older brother's a virgin for whatever reason, and it was meant to be done for comedic effect, but it just didn't seem to really fit with the character we'd seen up until that point. It was a character who was, first of all, scared that she was going to die and scared that she was going to lose her parents, and then randomly injected into this weird sex joke in the middle, which I was a little bit, I just felt it was very jarring in terms of the tone of the film. It was the one bit that just made me go, wait, what? It does have Finn Jones from Game of Thrones and from Iron Fist. Can't believe I still remember that. Who's in the film for a while. He probably lends the second most amount of star power in the film. His role is cut very early on. So I'd say in terms of character backstory and ultimate development, it does better than the actual plot of the film itself. The third aspect I said at the beginning was a satisfying ending. Now there's like a little bit of light at the end, so like, okay, well, everything is still shit now, but it's implied that it's gonna get better later. However, the resolution, or at least what they present as the solution to the problem, seems to be, it's not very inspired, and I think a lot of it is going to come to the fact that this is something that technically can't be survived, because eventually your brain's going to malfunction because of sleep deprivation and you are going to die, compared to your standard zombie apocalypse where you can survive for long enough. So the impact of finding a cure for it is blunted by the fact that because of the plot, the cure had to be found by the protagonist before she died, which definitely would have been after 5 to 6 days. So a lot of the impact of a cure has finally been found is weakened because they find a solution, but they've only been suffering for 5 to 6 days compared to everyone else where maybe a cure doesn't seem possible at all. I think the idea is they try to make it more tense because there's like a ticking clock on how long they have to find the cure, because eventually all the scientists smart enough to find the cure will die within 5 to 6 days. So there's like that feeling of urgency, I guess. But the idea is that it's so conveniently done. You have scientists and doctors in the show that couldn't figure it out, but it's figured out ultimately by Matilda, who I believe is like a 12-year-old girl in the film or something like that. So it just kind of seems a bit too convenient that the plot revolves so much specifically around the main characters to that extent. There needs to be a level of believability, I think, and authenticity to the ending, and I just found it to be way too convenient. Ultimately, a unique take on this less than 100-minute apocalypse kind of film. Is the movie any good? I'd give it maybe like a 2 out of 5, I guess. It's not a trend-setting film. Then again, it's a Netflix film. I don't expect it to be trend-setting. They're very, very rare. But it offered something purely based on a character with a good backstory, and you can watch it just to appreciate that. However, if you're looking for a apocalypse film where you want to get lost in the plot, nah, this ain't it. That was episode 1 of Any Good Movie Review. I'm gonna do another film, I'd say maybe next week now. I've watched a couple and I want to do another one. I think I'm gonna go for, I watched 2008 film Wanted for the first time, starring James McAvoy, Angelina Jolie, Common and Morgan Freeman. I'm not going to say what I thought of it right now. I will save that for my next movie review. So I'll do that next week. That's going to be that one. Now I am going to go to sleep because I am about to go insane. Roll credits.